Hello, everyone. I'm Alessandra Cannelli, second Vice President of TESOL Italy, and I'd like you to welcome to this session of TESOL Italy 48th Convention. Certificates of attendance will be available to download from the convention page of the TESOL Italy website after the convention. Our speakers for this session are Valerie Coutinho and Elsa O'Brien. Valerie is the British Council's Regional SEN Coordinator for Europe and the Americas, based in Portugal. She has had a long career as an English language teacher and translator, during which she has taught in a wide range of settings, from kindergartens and language schools to educational colleges and university. She currently leads and supports a team of special educational needs coordinators and champions across the region. Elsa O'Brien is a young learner English teacher and special educational needs coordinator for the British Council in Madrid. So Elsa and Valerie, the floor is yours.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I've clicked out of my session. I'm sorry about that.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm hoping you can all see that.
Yeah.
All right. I'm just going to pause it for a moment. Sorry about this. I was all set up to go, and then the session started, and I got a bit confused. Okay, right. All right, so thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. I hope you can all see that. Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. We're going to be talking today. The session is divided into two very distinct parts. We're going to start with my part, which is about inclusion in general. And then we're going to go on to Elsa's part of the talk, which is where she's going to focus on a specific case where the British Council Madrid has been working with ONCE, the Spanish Institute for the Blind, to provide online lessons for blind and visually impaired students. Okay. I'm sorry, I'm going to, okay, yeah, here we go. I'm just going to pause for a moment, everybody, if you don't mind, because I have lost my notes. And I don't think I'll give a very good, talk without them. I don't know what's happened. Okay. I'm going to try again. I don't know what's happening here. Sorry, I've got all this ready, and now it seems to have crashed around me. Okay, Elsa, are you ready to go? Because maybe you can go first, because I've lost all my notes. I don't know what's happened to them. Would you like to go first with your part and tell us about your wonderful project in Spain? Thank you.
Yes, of course. If you want to stop sharing, and then I'll share my screen.
I will. Thank you.
How exciting to go first. I'll make sure I stick to the time. Yeah. As Valerie mentioned, it doesn't really matter who goes first, because it's two very different presentations. They're related because they're both about the topic of inclusion and the fact that it's at the heart of everything we do at the British Council. But Valerie is going to talk a little bit more about well, just the whole of inclusion as one of our main values, and I'm just going to mention briefly a very interesting example, I think, from a project that we started 2 years ago. As she already mentioned, we signed a collaboration agreement 2 years ago now, a little bit over 2 years ago. Can you see my screen okay? Yes?
We can see it, but not in the show presentation
Okay.
form.
And now?
Say,
Same thing.
the organization says to
Press
push
F5.
F5 button.
Yeah, that's what I'm...
I'm glad it wasn't just me.
It's weird.
Sorry, Elsa.
Yeah, sorry, just a sec. This is funny. Any difference now?
No.
It's the same.
So you can just see a small version. Is that what you can see?
Yes, we can see all the slides on the left and the one you are highlighting in the center. I invite you to continue, otherwise time goes on and you're not going to have time to say what, because, okay, now we can see, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I haven't done anything. Okay, well, anyway, I was saying that this is basically what I want to talk about is a case in point, no, of the many examples that we could have talked about today regarding inclusion in our English classes. But I think this one is probably a slightly different one. It was a very exciting one for us when this agreement was signed 2 years ago, and I was involved in it as a teacher and as a special educational needs coordinator for the British Council in Spain. We also had, apart from it being very enriching for us, we also had very good feedback, very positive feedback from parents and from the students themselves. And of course, this made it even more rewarding for the people involved in it. So hopefully I will get through very briefly what the collaboration consisted of, a little bit the profile of the students, because that's very important. Of course, the kind of materials that we used in these lessons and the support tools that the students needed to access these materials. And most importantly, the teaching tips and the techniques and the advice that we extracted from it, and then I would like to share with you today. And well, then we can just wonder for a minute about the bigger picture and where we're leading from here and how we're going to be able to use what we learned in this project. So as Valerie mentioned, ONCE, or in English, ONCE, is the Spanish National Organization for the Blind. It's a very big organization in Spain. It was founded in 1938 to help promote education and give access to employment to people with visual impairment and blind. So everybody knows who they are. They also do one of the main lotteries in the country. So it's really a very well-known and very important organization. And we approached them 2 years ago because we wanted to acquire knowledge and experience in teaching students with visually impaired disability or completely blind. So one of the first actions that we took, because it's really a long-term collaboration, was to open 2 online classes to secondary students. within our product of secondary plus classes. However, these two groups that we opened, B1 and B2 level, were exclusively for visually impaired and blind students. So the learners were roughly between 12 and 17 years old. The classes were online, so they were all in different parts of Spain. Some of them knew each other from events that the ONCE had organizes every year, but most of them didn't. As in every class, they all had different needs, because in this case, even though they all had some kind of visual impairment, they had different levels and different types of it. So they also required very different types of support. These were extracurricular classes for them because they all went to mainstream schools or to specialist schools in the morning, and then they came to these classes with us in the afternoon. Of course, given the age range, they also had different levels of literacy, and ONCE helped them and us and supported them and us with this. So at the beginning, it was a steep learning curve in terms of digital literacy. But apart from this, they're just typical teenagers with typical interests, hobbies. Most of them are really into sports, music, serious. So yes, basically they were just typical teenagers in many ways. We used the same platform that we use for all of our online classes, which is a learning hub that then leads on to Zoom. The platform is accessible. ONCE made sure of it before we started the classes, so students were able to use it with their screen readers if they couldn't see. Some of them were able to see and to zoom in, and other ones needed to use screen readers, and we made sure that the platform was accessible to the screen readers. However, then what we did use was magazines, different formats of them depending on the degree of visual impairment. We don't use books at the British Council in Secondary. We use these magazines that are topic based and project based. So we just use the same materials with these students. In some cases, we just sent them the printed version. In other cases, we adapted them slightly so that they could be printed onto Braille. And a lot of students access the magazines with JAWS, which is the screen reader, text-to-speech software. So in this case, we needed to provide them with the Word document of the magazine. And teachers also, they are supported, and they use what they really use in their classes are PDFs, which PowerPoints, which break down the tasks in the magazine. So in this case, we also shared these with the students, but of course, making some little adaptations that I will mention now in a minute. We're not going to go into all the technicalities of adapting materials, but I think that one of the main things that we can mention briefly is that all of the decorative images that we like seeing now when we present a PowerPoint, they were of no use here. So we just got rid of all of those images, and then those images that were relevant, what we did was make sure that there was alt text everywhere, right? That it was relevant so that students could access the task by reading the description. Sorry, okay. So there are, of course, some things that teachers need to consider in any task when teaching visually impaired students. And one of these considerations is key when we do, for example, reading and listening activities. And it's that students will have to rely a lot on their memory, because when they're reading or listening to a task, they can't just easily glance back at the questions, at the options of the questions, and then at the same time carry on listening or glance back at the text. So one of the main things that we need to make sure is that we break down these tasks. All students, even in a mixed class, will benefit from this, I'm sure, for different reasons, but it's especially important when we're teaching visually impaired students. And of course, for the same reason, we need to make sure that tasks are kept simple and focused, that we give instructions orally, because we can't just assume that they're going to be picking up on visual cues. Even those that can see a little bit, they might not be relying so much on that sense. And a lot of the students will use a screen reader, as I just mentioned, so tasks can take longer in general, because it's not the same just taking a quick look at something and relying on these visual cues as having to listen to instructions, or even having to navigate, open a PowerPoint using the screen reader. So tasks can take longer to set up and then to carry out. And we have to bear this in mind. We have to adjust our expectations. With regards to the format of the tasks, I mentioned a few of them, but Word documents are probably the safest format, because it's accessible for JAWS, for the screen reader. It's very easy to print. If students have onto Braille, if students have a printer, it can be zoomed in as well. So it's a very easy document if we just want to type some vocabulary in quickly and send it to students in the chat. What we found in this case is that speaking activities were very accessible and enjoyable, and that students were actually very good at it. They had very good listening and speaking skills, but it took time for them to build confidence even in an all visually impaired class. So teachers need to be patient and need to bear in mind that it's not because students might spend a whole term not participating much that they're not enjoying it. In my case, it took like a term and a half for them to really open up and to actually start proposing activities themselves. After a term and a half, they were all asking to bring in presentations about a topic that they liked. They were asking to make quizzes for their classmates. So, but this took a term and a half. Like before that, they were quite self-conscious because they probably go to class in a very different setting during the day, in which everything goes really fast. They don't get a lot of chances to participate. So it took a while for them to get used to that. This was a totally different setting where they did get the chance to participate and they were listened to. And anyway, the moment arrived. So I was told, be patient by the previous teachers, and they were right. It took a while, but we got there. When using video in class, it's very important to check them in advance and make sure that they're not only based on visuals, because of course this is something we use a lot in English as a foreign language, because it's even with low levels or students with other kinds of special needs might benefit from just visuals and then talking about it, but we need to make sure there's running commentary for visually impaired students. And other resources, apart from Word, that we found were accessible were Bamboozle. I'm sure that some of you know about this online game. It's an online game in which the teacher shares their screen. So it's very easy just to narrate what's going on. We just need to remember to narrate the scores and narrate let them know what numbers are still left that they can choose from. And of course, when there's when behind one of the numbers, there's something like you lose points or switch points or that kind of thing, just in order to add to it the excitement, let them know what's going on. But it's one of the most accessible online games. Kahoot isn't. Even though they say so on their webpage, but we tried it and it isn't accessible for them, and they love it. And it's very easy to do vocabulary review using this game. And another very good tool is the Survivor audio series. It's from the British Council webpage. It's open to everybody. And one of the advantages is that it's in different levels from A2 to B2. So we can choose which one we want to listen to. It's got 5 or 6 episodes, and it's a really intriguing and exciting series. It's a mystery, and the sound effects are amazing. So they really enjoyed it. Not only visually impaired students will enjoy it, anybody will, but it's a great resource to use in our classes to practice listening, and then there's comprehension exercises. As I said, we can't really go into materials and how to make them accessible, but I'm just going to give you an acronym and a link at the end so that we bear this in mind. The acronym is SCOLT, and it talks about the structure. So the reading order needs to be logical. The color and the contrast has to be strong enough so that those students who can see a little bit will be able to make out the writing. We need to make sure we remember to use alt text in images. Links, we shouldn't paste the whole link, because when they're using a screen reader, it's really annoying to be listening to the whole link. So we should just embed them in the text, and they need to be self-explanatory, like click here if you would like to know more, or click here to follow the link. Language should be plain, simple, explicative, and then tables should also be simple and only used when we really need them to present numbers, not to present other kind of written data, because they really aren't accessible in general with screen readers. And now I think the most important part for me is really the learnings that we extracted from this. So really the overall teaching tips, which would be not just during games, but in general, always give a running commentary through the lesson. At the beginning, we tended to forget to say, okay, now we're going into breakout rooms and you are going with these people. Then, of course, even ask students to do the same thing. When we go into a breakout room, say, hello, I'm here. This is me. Because, some students are actually very good at asking for this information that's missing, but not everybody will be. As students are relying on memory, it's very important to keep note of new language and then just share it quickly in a Word document after the class. Something important, if it's the first time we teach visually impaired students, we don't need to change the way we say things. Like, we can talk about basic colors, because in general, they will have their own notions of what those colors are and what to associate them with. We can use language such as watch and see. They use it as well, because these words mean something different to everybody. So they say it themselves. I've seen it, I've seen that, I've watched this. Okay, that just means something different to everybody, and it's okay to use those words. Oh, sorry, same one again. And as I mentioned before, everything takes longer. We need to adjust our expectations and make sure that we don't get stressed about covering a lot of content, because we're learning other things. We're learning process language, we're learning digital literacy, and if it's face-to-face, we will be learning probably a lot of other language, because we're still doing what we're doing in English. Now we're learning how to learn in English. I think it's very important as well to try things out, to ask students for feedback about, for example, Kahoot, as we did. It was supposed to be accessible, so we tried it out, and then I asked them for feedback. And when we want to try something new, some kind of interaction, just give things time and try it out a few times to see if it works, such as speaking, group activities, group project group. And I think probably one of the most important tips that should have been the first one is talk to your students. Sometimes we'll need to do it privately after class. Sometimes they'll be happy to talk about it during the class, but they are definitely the best source of information. Their parents as well, if they're young students, they're the ones that are going to tell us what their impairment is, what their needs are, what their support tools are, and basically what they need from us. My students last year were really good at letting me know the adjustments they needed from me in the PowerPoint, or what kind of things they needed me to share in the chat, and everything went really well thanks to the fact that they were very active at letting me know what they needed. And even though they have different needs from what we might be used to, I think it's key not to underestimate what they're capable of. So support them, of course, scaffold their learning, but give them the autonomy they need and the time they need to work on something, and just trust them and make sure that we give them that autonomy and that they know they have our support. And of course, then the question is, what are we going to do, or what are we doing at the moment with this knowledge and this new expertise? Well, the first thing we're doing, of course, is just sharing everything we learned across the network within our organization and outside. And what we really want to do is make sure that all of our teachers now have the training that they need to have in order to accommodate visually impaired students in any of our mainstream classrooms, either face-to-face or online. That's actually what we're doing this year. The 2-year collaboration is over. So our students are now starting to sign up for mainstream classes. The visually impaired students are in mainstream classes, and everything they need in order to be supported in class is now in place. The materials have been adapted, so they're able to attend any of our courses, either a young learner or adult. So that's what lies ahead. That's what we started to do this year, and hopefully more and more students will be able to join in the future. There's some links here in case anybody would like to do a bit more reading. There's an article, there's some of the things I mentioned, the game, the audio series, some information on screen readers, color contrast. But I've also shared in the resource section a handout with this basic information and all the links. So it's probably easier if you just download it and look at it in your own time. That's all on my side. Thanks a lot for listening, and I think we can talk about inclusion as a whole now, Valerie.
I hope it's going to be, I'm hoping I'll be able to present it. Thank you, Elsa, for stepping in. Yeah, so what I'm going to talk about is, let me see if I can get this up for you. Okay, can everybody see that okay?
Yeah, very well.
Yeah, okay, brilliant. All right, so inclusion at the heart of everything we do is the title of our session. And what I was going to say, first of all, was, that's it's an incredibly huge, big statement to make, isn't it? Inclusion at the heart of everything we do. So, but of course, it's nothing new. Inclusion is nothing new. This concept of inclusive education is nothing new. In fact, I mean, it's been over 30 years since the Salamanca Statement. This is when 92 countries came together to sign an agreement to make inclusive education a core value in their societies. More recently, of course, we've had in 2015 the United Nations ratified 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And the fourth one is specifically about quality education. And in fact, yeah, I've written it for you there. It goes into more detail. It's divided into several parts, but essentially it's ensuring inclusive and equitable education for all learners. Okay, but all this, I think, is easier said than done, right? Obviously we have massive challenges to creating inclusive classrooms. So I'm going to start by taking a look at some of those challenges very briefly. And you may or may not agree with me, and you may have other things that you can think of that are challenges to providing inclusive education. Okay, so teacher confidence, I think, is one of the main things. Elsa's touched on that, obviously, in her part of the talk already. But, I'm not qualified. I'm not qualified to teach these learners with disabilities, with learning differences. I've got an autistic student in my class. I don't know what to do. I've got a student with ADHD. What do I do? So that's one of the main challenges I think we have. Another challenge is workload. The maybe perceived, maybe real, the increased workload of making adjustments for learners with special educational needs and disability. And not only that, in general, I think our lives as teachers, that we have more admin, there's more expected of us, we have longer classroom hours, our retirement age is going up, all those things contribute to workload, of course. The increasing complexity. Okay, yes, again, we have to think more carefully, perhaps, about our planning, about our classroom management. And obviously, a big thing is funding. As teachers, there's not much we can do about that, of course. But, who's going to pay for things like assistive technology that we might need? The teaching assistants that we might need in our classrooms to give us that extra support, and to give our learners, more importantly, that extra support. And of course, creating things like safe spaces for learners. They all require funding and management. And another challenge, I think we've got to mention now, mental health. Certainly for some of the reasons I've already mentioned, for teachers themselves. But, for learners, we've seen huge increases in anxiety and depression among, well, not only teens, also in younger children, especially since the pandemic. And this also, is a challenge for us. Okay, so we talked about the challenges very briefly, but what about what we can actually do? What can we do as teachers? There are several things, I think. The first one, I think we've got to say, is high quality teaching. All right, and there are inclusive teaching strategies that are, if we include those, they are going to be best teaching strategies for everybody. All right, so they're going to benefit all our students, whether our students have a learning difference or not. They're going to be great for everyone. So I'm going to look briefly at three of those things that we probably already have in our baggage, but I thought I would just kind of remind you of them here today. So the first one is explicit instruction. So what do we mean by that? Are we giving our learners clear explanations in clear and succinct language? Do we model the task, for example, before we expect learners to do it independently? Do we use that dual coding? Do we just give them a verbal instruction? Do we back it up with a table, a diagram? Do we help them understand new content? Yeah. So we have to be really explicit in our instruction. That's number one. The second one is cognitive and metacognitive strategies. So how do we support our learners to remember previously learned content? How do we do that? Do we help them organize their thinking by chunking things into smaller steps? Do we ask the right metacognitive questions to support them to plan their work, to monitor their work, and to evaluate what they have learned? You know, at the end of the lesson, do we ask them about that? Do we ask them what they've learned? What did they find difficult? Did they achieve what they expected to achieve? What could they have done differently? What could they have done better? So all these questions will help our learners. And as I say, not only learners with special educational needs, but also every learner in the class. And number 3 is scaffolding. So how do we scaffold our tasks, our activities in the classroom? Do we give them, for example, in writing, do we give them a supportive tool? Do we give them a writing frame? Do we give them a partially completed example? Do we give them sentence stems? Are we moving towards being able to remove that scaffolding at a later date? And very importantly as well, are we providing scaffolding that's non-stigmatizing? So, you know, if we're just providing scaffolding for one learner, that's going to make that learner feel uncomfortable. So do we provide that? We should provide that, maybe that scaffolding to a small group rather than just for one. So as I said earlier, these are probably things that we're doing in our teaching anyway, but it's a good reminder to reflect on our practice, I think. And also, if we're involved in leading, mentoring, teacher education, supporting teachers, observing teachers, giving feedback, these are all very, very valid points. Okay, another important area, I think, is identifying and responding to needs. What we're promoting at the British Council is a graduated approach. And what is the graduated approach, you may ask? So the graduated approach it provides a framework in which we identify a need, we can respond to the need, and we can monitor the need. And it looks something like this, which I'm sure you'll be familiar with. So first of all, we review the situation. Imagine a teacher comes to us and is struggling with a learner in class, the learner has challenges to their learning. So the first step is to review. What does that involve? It could involve class observations. It could involve, first of all, I think as Elsa mentioned also, talking to the learner. I'm always amazed when I'm supporting teachers, how often they say they haven't talked to the learner first. So that reviewing the situation, based on that, it might involve talking to the parents. It might involve, if we have a learner with an identified learning difference, it might involve talking to an occupational therapist, a psychologist. It might involve all of those things. Reviewing, getting as much information as we can about that learner. Based on that, we can then assess and decide what we're going to do. Usually it's baby steps. Maybe we're going to identify 2 behaviors that we want to help the learner to either improve or that barrier to overcome. So we have the review stage, the assess stage, and then of course we, sorry, I've started with the review. Assess, plan, and then but it is cyclical. So we're assessing, we're planning, then we're implementing. Normally we need to allow time for that. Okay, and then we review. Has it all worked? No. Let's try something else. And it's a cycle. Okay. So that's the graduated approach. Another very important thing is partnerships. So having that very effective and strong partnerships between the school and the parents. Okay, so yes, we need to involve the learners in decisions in that graduated approach, but we certainly need to involve parents. And I think it's one of the cornerstones of a strong school is that partnership working with parents. I think also we need to have high expectations for all our learners, okay? And I think that's one of the problems sometimes when we have a label. Okay, so we know that a learner has ADHD, for example, before we teach them. Does that affect our expectations for them? Okay, so I think we need to think about that. Let's, it can be dangerous. And it can mean that, if our learner has, if we have low expectations, it can also mean low outcomes. So I think that's something else as teachers we can really consider. Let's aim high for those students. And there's been some recent research in the UK. This is based on UK research. But so what do parents actually want? We talked about that strong link between the school and the parents. What do parents want most? And these were the top 5. And I thought some of them were quite interesting. So let's see what you think. So they prioritize well-being and happiness of their child. They want flexibility in the classroom. They want flexibility from the teacher. They don't want necessarily, they want the teacher to be forgiving. We can't always expect a learner who's already, a dyslexic learner, for example, who's already working twice as hard to do their homework. If the learner says, I haven't managed to do my homework, let's be a little bit flexible. They want reasonable adjustments in the classroom for their children. They want staff training, so they want staff to know and understand better the needs and challenges of their children. And last but not least, they want kindness, and I think that's something that we also really need to think about when we're in the classroom. And very interestingly, just to compare, what do students want? This was from a recent survey done in the UK from the Office of National Statistics. It's based on educational experiences of young people with special educational needs and disability in England. So this is just England. But the students said they wanted empathy, they wanted respect, and they wanted care. So that kind of mirrors what the parents want too. They want updated and appropriate support plans. So, maybe you can see where that graduated approach comes in here. They want them to be updated. They want them to be appropriate. We may find that when we get to the review stage that hasn't worked. So let's go back and try something else. Or that's no longer working, or it has worked very well. So let's keep doing it. They want more awareness and understanding needs. So that also goes back to what the parents said about staff training. They want us to consider their learning styles and preferences. That's really looking at the individual learner. What do they need and how do they learn? And again, I think it's linked to that sort of metacognitive training. And once again, good communication between all parties. So improving the outcomes for all our learners, but specifically our learners with special educational needs and disability, involves everyone. I think we need to take a whole school approach to this. It's everybody's business. And there's evidence for this. It's not just me. It's not just what I think. I'm basing this on evidence. Leaders promote inclusivity. So if your leaders are on board in your schools, they're going to help. They're on board with inclusivity, and they're going to support you. That's half the battle. We need to provide regular and appropriate training. We're going to boost that confidence in our teachers that we looked at the beginning. It's one of the challenges, right? Boost that confidence. So providing appropriate training and therefore achieving that high quality teaching that we looked at. The empathy and high expectations that I mentioned earlier. Learners want that empathy, they want that understanding from teachers, and as teachers, we need to have high expectations for our learners. There needs to be that active listening to both the learner and the parent, and using those evidence-based interventions. As I mentioned, that was only one of them, but the graduated approach is a clear example of that. And using the three teaching high quality teaching tips I mentioned earlier: the scaffolding, the explicit instruction, the metacognition. Okay, and I think I just about managed to finish on time. If you would like those links, there's a couple of QR codes there. Useful links: the Special Educational Needs in Mainstream School is a publication from the Education Endowment Foundation. They have loads of, if you don't know them, they have loads of evidence-based research, which is really, really useful. And they also publish guidance reports. And this one from Nathan is the Help on Whole School Send, is a teacher handbook for special educational needs. And it looks not only at English language teaching, but also in other subjects too. So it has lots of ideas. Okay, so thank you all very much for listening. I'm sorry about my little glitch at the beginning. And thanks, Elsa, for stepping in. There's my email address there if anyone would like to get in touch with about anything. And once again, I'd really like to thank TESOL Italy for inviting us to speak today. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thanks a lot, everyone. I'm just going to pop my email into the chat because I think I didn't leave the slide on for long enough. So same thing. Please feel free to get in touch. And thanks a lot for listening. Valerie, somebody's asking for some link. I'm just gonna, well, yeah, I guess it's a link in particular. I'm gonna send the handout in the chat as well, just in case people can't find it in the download section.
Yes, they're asking for the link.
Okay.
Okay. I thank you on behalf of TESOL Italy for this inspiring session. It shows us something we didn't think of about, but I think it's very important to help all people impaired with different situations and find this form of empathy you showed us. But it is an empathy based on professionality. That is, it is nothing prepared just on the spot, but it's something thought about. And we thank you very much for this. It is very, very important for us. So we thank you, and we remind all the people that are listening that they will be able to download the certificate of attendance at the end of the conference from TESOL Italy's website. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot for inviting us.
Yeah, thank you.